Sure.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to Global Lawyers of Canada Virtual Mentor Office Hours. Tonight we have a full house. We still have some people joining us, but tonight we're joined by two very special guests to be our mentors for this evening. We're joined by Akash Bir, who is the Director of Legal Talent at Thomson LLP, and Adam Rock, who is a partner at Nerland Lindsey LLP. And they are going to give you a little bit of an introduction to who they are and how their firms sit within the law firm.
I'm sorry, Siobhan, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Hopefully you can hear me now, fingers crossed. So then the guys are going to talk about how their law firm fits in terms of the law firm size, schemes across Canada, and then they're going to tell you a little bit about their roles in terms of recruitment at their firms, and then they're going to be taking your questions to do with recruitment either at the summer student level, article students, or even lateral hires. So get those questions in. The guys are going to be happy to answer them. Akash, if we go over to you first.
Sure. Thanks so much for the introduction, Siobhan. As Siobhan said, my name is Akash. I'm the Director of Legal Talent here at Miller Thomson for the Calgary, Edmonton, Regina, and Saskatoon offices. So my role is not only to do recruitment, but it's more on the professional development side. So career development for the associate, all the compensation reviews, annual reviews, the hiring and the letting go of associates and whatnot. So that kind of all falls under me, and then providing them with professional resources to career in their as an associate until they get to that partner level. Before joining Miller Thomson, I was working for a legal recruitment firm called the Counsel Network, and where I was strictly just doing associate recruitment for firms across Canada. And to answer Siobhan's question about where our firm lies kind of in the spectrum of law firms, we are the largest law firm in Canada with 12 offices across the country, in every province besides the Maritimes and the Territories and Manitoba. So I think we are the largest, but in terms of the type of work that we do across the country is on the mid-market work, as well as a few institutional clients as well. So that's kind of how we differ from the Blakes and the McCarthys of the world. Is we've got a different kind of business model in terms of the clients that we take on. So that's kind of what I do. Adam, maybe I'll pass the torch off to you.
Maybe before then, I'll just want to add that Akash has been with GLC since day one. And in 2016 and 17, he provided great seminars for our members, live seminars.
Thank you.
It's been great.
It's been a pleasure working with GLC, and it's been a lot of fun for me, and I love working with you guys, so it's been great.
Thanks, Akash, for being here with us today.
Okay, over to you, Adam.
So thank you, Siobhan. I was born and raised in England, and I lived in Germany for 2 years as well. I'm not sure if you can detect an English accent or a Canadian accent. In any case, I emigrated to the city of Calgary in the province of Alberta when I was 21 years old. I attended law school at the University of Toronto in the province of Ontario on a scholarship for first-generation college graduates. After my first year of law school, I spent the summer conducting research for a law professor at the University of Calgary. After my second year of law school, I was a summer student at Osler, Hoskin and Harcourt, a national law firm based in Toronto. After graduation, I articled at Bennett Jones, also a national law firm based in Calgary. I joined Nerland Lindsey, my current firm, after 3 years at Bennett Jones. Nerland Lindsey is a firm of approximately 25 lawyers with small offices in Calgary and Vancouver. Most of us practice in an area called private client services. That means we help high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals and families with a range of corporate, tax, estate, and matrimonial matters. I'm a partner in the corporate group at Nerland Lindsey. My clients are a mix of entrepreneurs, startup companies, family offices, and investment funds. I'm also a member of Nerland Lindsey's 3-person student recruitment committee. So I have responsibility for a wide range of matters relating to student recruitment. We typically hire graduates from the University of Calgary, and that has a lot to do with proximity. But we've also hired graduates from the following firms, the following universities. Bond University and the University of Sydney in Australia, the University of Manchester in England, the University of Pune in India, the University of Ibadan in Nigeria, and Ateneo de Manila University in the Philippines.
Wow, you guys really do hire from all over the world, so that's great. That is not often the case for places, so that's wonderful to see. And I know that Kenny, who's joining us, is also with you as well. So
that's right. So Kenny is my legal assistant, and I'm not sure how many of you know of Kenny or have met Kenny, but he's I understand he's one of your VPs, and he's a valued member of the Nerland Lindsey team.
No, he's a very invaluable member of our team too. Like, we would be completely lost at Global Lawyers of Canada without Kenny, especially for myself. He is my go-to for anything tech related because I am useless.
And I'm not sure how many of the participants caught this, but Siobhan, you and I just worked out that our respective firms are working on a deal together at the moment.
We certainly are, and we had absolutely no idea until we randomly started talking today. So
that's right.
This is a prime example of networking in action right here for us. So we have some great talent here with us tonight. We have, big law firms, regional law firms, huge amounts of experience, recruiter turned in-house recruitment and people development roles. So this is your opportunity to ask all your questions, any type of question, because it's going to be covered here with our 2 guests tonight. But let's kick it off. Let's talk about summering, okay? Because summering is a challenging one for many internationally trained lawyers to get a summer position because they're arriving at the wrong time of the year. They're not in the Canadian law school cycle of the process traditionally, just because who knows when people are arriving and what stage they're at. So do you guys have any tips for how people can maybe go about getting into that summer program, or some alternatives which will help when it comes to the next phase of applying for articles later on? I mean, Adam, you can give it from a recruiting process, from a smaller firm, and Akash, I know Miller Thomson has a much more like structured process.
Yeah. So Adam, maybe I'll let you go first, and I can jump in after.
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So even though I attended a well-regarded Canadian law school, I found the process of applying for summer positions very confusing and very stressful. So as I mentioned, after my first year of law school, I spent the summer conducting research for a law professor at the University of Calgary. And how I landed that job was the law professor was a friend of a friend of a friend. And so I'm an introvert. And so I stepped out of my comfort zone and reached out directly to the law professor and asked him if there was any possible way he would have some kind of work that I could do during the summer. I indicated that I wasn't picky and I'd be prepared to do almost anything. And I think, you know, if you're outside of the formal process, if you attended a non-Canadian law school, then you need to be prepared to step out of your comfort zone and reach out to friends, family members, business associates, LinkedIn connections, and attempt to establish those kind of relationships. Now, we're a smallish law firm, so you're right, Siobhan. We typically take a much more informal approach to our summer hiring. We will review and evaluate every single application we receive. And we will, given the right circumstances, we will consider applicants for abbreviated summer positions, full positions, summer student positions, clerking positions, legal assistant roles, paralegal roles. We're pretty flexible, and I think participants on this call will find most small and medium-sized firms to be a bit more flexible than the large firms, but that's just my personal experience. Akash?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head there, Adam. Even for us across the country during our summer recruit, our 2Ls and our 1L recruit, you know, we open up the portal for all students across the country, right? So we don't really discriminate against if you're coming from a Calgary law school or UVA or an international law school. We in fact embrace that, and we like to see a lot of diversity in our students. In fact, we have some associates at the firm right now that have come from other law schools in Calgary. I know we've got a few in Regina who are internationally qualified, and they're fantastic. So you know, there's sometimes a misconception where NCA candidates find that they are a little bit more at a disadvantage. I did see a question pop up here that, you know, they aren't going to be qualified for summer roles. But, you know, speaking from my firm specifically, even though we are a national firm, you know, we don't essentially disqualify those candidates that are coming from an international background, right? So timing sometimes is a factor when it comes to articling and finishing NCAs, but for the summer student perspective, you know, we try to make it all-encompassing as much as we can, even as a lateral hire or lateral associate recruit. Really, for us, it doesn't come down to, you know, where did you practice, where did you go to law school for us. So we'd like to see that, you know, you have the skill set, you're able to actually practice law here and get on with the team, and are you a good lawyer, right? So for us, it's not as big a deal. There's other factors to consider as well for us. So
that's good to know. So one of the questions that also came up was about timings. So I believe that, Akash, you, I say you, I mean Miller Thomson, not you personally, but you have a set sort of time of the year where people can apply, right? And if you go to your website, all of the timings are on there, correct?
Exactly. So all of the timings are up there now. We use, I don't know if everybody here knows what viPortal is, but we use a specific portal that the law schools use as well. And then we've also opened it up to, I think, everybody on our website to Calgary, just so that everybody knows here. Calgary only does the 1L recruit, and we'd like to bring our students back um, for articling and 2L as well. So so that they're part of the firm for the entirety of their career. Essentially, is how we like to see it, longevity of their career. So our 1L recruit, I believe, happens in February, and that's with all the firms across the city. They all have the same timing for their 1L recruit. 2L recruit, I think, happens in the fall, and I could be wrong on that, but I think it's in September, October, after OCIs. So.
And Adam, is it similar for yourselves, or do you not have to adhere to those same timings in terms of summer students?
Yeah, typically we adhere to those requirements. That being said, we're somewhat more flexible than our national counterparts. I empathize with the participants on the call. Again, it's a really confusing process. So for articling students, and Akash can correct me if I'm wrong, but in Calgary, law firms tend to solicit and then candidates submit applications to law firms during the first 3 weeks of May. Then the firms review applications and schedule interviews during the last week of May. And then firms conduct interviews during the first week of June. And then firms make offers on the Tuesday of the second week in June. And those offers must remain open for acceptance for 24 hours. Now, so really confusing. The large firms in Calgary and Edmonton, or perhaps all firms in Calgary and Edmonton, are subject to those rules, but then towns and cities outside of Edmonton and Calgary are not subject to those rules. It's a really confusing patchwork.
It's hard to navigate, I find, even for us.
Yeah.
So many parts to it. And then there's, on top of that, there's law society rules that we have to adhere to as well, just so that we're not, our hands aren't being slapped either. But it's a confusing process for the students, right? And every time I do the recruitment, I'm like, I feel so bad for you guys having to go through the OCI process, having to go through the recruitment process, and then interviewing. It's not, by no means is it fun. So kudos to you guys having to do that.
And we're not expecting you to have jotted down all of those dates, by the way. If you go on to the Bar Association website for whichever bar you want to apply to, and you look at the articling section, it will have all of those dates on. Now, just be aware right now, those dates are different for each different bar association.
That's right.
But they will be slightly different. And one of the questions that came up was about COVID. And I know personally, and you guys will be able to tell me this from some of the others, but here in BC, our dates have been changed slightly. I would assume that the other bars are doing that as well, and the dates are being pushed to give a bit more time because of COVID for applications.
So I know in Alberta, we are thinking of, I think the U of C is changing the dates for the 2L recruit. I don't know what those are. We don't participate in the 2L recruit in Calgary anyways, or Edmonton. So maybe Adam, you know those dates better than I do. I haven't heard anything about the February 1L recruit dates for Calgary and Edmonton. I can't speak to Ontario, but I do think that you're correct that the pandemic is actually affecting all the dates, and they should be posted sooner than later, I think.
Yeah. I mean, if I had advice for participants on the call, it would be to pay close attention to firm websites. The national firms in particular, like Miller Thomson, typically set out all of the important dates clearly and concisely on the student web pages or their career web pages. So pay close attention to those dates. That being said, if you're applying to a smaller firm, there's a chance that that smaller firm's not going to be quite as rigid in terms of the application and recruitment process, especially if you express interest in a paralegal role or a legal assistant role.
And you know what? And that segues perfectly into one of our questions that we've received. Actually, a couple of questions that have come through. But Mauricio, would you like to ask your question, because that's very timely for what Adam has just said?
Sure, of course. And I'm assuming I can open my audio, right?
Yep, you've done it.
Okay, that's good.
Yep,
well, thank you very much for all of your coming today. I'm just not opening my camera because I thought there was gonna be a webinar and I didn't know that you guys were gonna able to see me. And I feel like I'm not like dressing properly. So yes, so one of my questions was related to somehow with Adam was talking about, because I came from a civil law jurisdiction. I'm Brazilian, right? So very different, and I'm not a native English native speaker, which puts a little bit more difficult on my journey. But you know, it's part of the journey. But you know, so I decided to. So I came to Canada. I'm finishing my MBA, and I decided to start to gain experience, practical experience, working as a legal assistant. Okay, and then and you know, it's so what I'm trying to do is like getting experience and then taking the legal education that I'm gonna need to get my degree recognized here. So my question is, does it make sense from a recruiter point of view to have someone who is a lawyer back in your country applying for a legal position, and then during the interview saying that your future goal will be becoming a lawyer?
I think it's a very good question. I think it all depends on the firm. So one of our assistants attended Bond University in Australia. She was a legal assistant at our firm for approximately 6 to 12 months before expressing interest in a legal role. And because she developed such a strong rapport, and because she impressed us with the quality of her work and her work ethic, we considered her for an articling position. In fact, two of our associates, now I come to think of it, another one of our associates was a legal assistant, then subsequently decided to attend law school. She attended Dalhousie University in the province of Nova Scotia, and then she came back to article with us. I think it all depends on the firm. I'm not sure if Akash has any particular insight on Miller Thomson's approach, but I personally think it's a good idea.
Sorry, I just lost my voice. I've been talking all day. Give me 1 sec, guys.
Yeah, the important thing is you have to really impress the lawyers you work with. The good news is you're given an opportunity to impress the lawyers you work with through your work ethic, your personality, your attention to detail, all of those things.
I think, Adam, you hit the nail on the head there. Similar for us is that if you We've had a similar situation in the past where a student from UC who didn't make the cut for 1L decided he would want to work for our firm because he believed in our firm and he liked the workplace. And he came back to work as a legal assistant at our firm while he's going to law school, and it's quite normal. And kudos to him for doing that, because he went with he was a legal assistant, whereas in his cohort, those 3 summer students were now summering with our firm while he was the assistant at the firm. So it shows a lot of initiative, and if he does good work, we would obviously want to consider him to come back, because he's now part of the fabric of the firm. So similar situation in our firm as well.
Mhm.
And yes, I've heard both sides of that. And I was a legal assistant and I wasn't hired back as an articling student. I went to a different firm, but it did help me get that position at an alternative firm. So it may be that you get a position, but it might not be where you currently are, just because of timing and numbers.
Right.
Right.
And to add to that, Siobhan, is that, a lot of firms would like to see, do you have any sort of law firm experience, whether it be in an assistant capacity or as a student capacity or whatever that may look like. It's easier to onboard you, and it's easier for the firm to kind of have you on board while knowing the fact that you know the ins and outs of a law firm, how to do the basics of the administrative work, and quote unquote the politics of a law firm as well, right? So it makes us feel a little bit more comfortable making that hire.
That's right.
And that kind of brings me to a nice question that was submitted to us online beforehand, was that requirement that Canadian firms are very keen on is having Canadian law firm experience. One of the questions that we get asked regularly at GLC is, how can I demonstrate that? How can I get that? Because, there aren't that many positions, obviously, summer student positions, legal assistant positions, paralegal positions, especially for paralegals. Quite often you require a paralegal qualification to do that. So, you touched on this before, Adam, of how you managed to get your position with the university lecturer and being his assistant. But do you guys have any other examples that you've seen people do and thought, that was a really clever way of getting some experience?
So I don't have any live examples, but I say this all the time, is that there, as you said, Siobhan, is that there's not that many positions available all the time, and people need to understand that we don't get 1 or 2 applicants for each position. We get a slate of 100 applicants or whatever that looks like. So it's hard to I could be applying for a job at Google and say, well, why am I not getting the job as a professional development director at Google? Because while I may be qualified, there's a lot of other applicants as well. So it doesn't come down to just that one person saying, I don't want to hire this person because of X, Y, and Z. So there's a variety of factors. And the market is really tight as well, right, for law firm roles. And it's not, recruitment in Calgary, and I would say in the legal profession across the country, is very difficult. And so I think candidates need to understand that it's not just about them, it's about the pool of candidates that are applying as well, right?
Yeah, just to give an example, so we're a pretty small firm, but we received 88 articling, 88 applications for 1 potential articling position in May. And I suspect a firm of Miller Thomson's size probably gets anywhere from 10 to 20 times that number of applications.
I mean, for our Regina office, I just did a recruit there, and I think we received 365 applicants or something like that.
Wow.
We only had 1 position for it, right? So, and that's because we've opened it up to NCA candidates, international qualified candidates, all over the country, essentially, right? So, and yeah, we, while we do prefer sometimes that the candidate come from the US, it's not always the best candidate that does. In fact, this year we didn't hire from the US, we hired from the UC. So even a small center like Regina or Saskatoon, we do get inundated with resumes.
And that doesn't surprise me at all, because there are so many students qualifying here in Canada and looking for positions, and then internationally trained lawyers are the biggest law school in Canada without being a designated law school, apparently. There's going to be high competition for the positions that are out there. Ete, I hope I pronounced that right. You asked a really good question just then. Do you want to pop on and ask it?
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Yeah, my question is really simple. It's basically, what makes a candidate stand out to you guys when you're recruiting? If I was to get into your head, what would I need to do?
And I think this goes to what you guys were just saying, that there's so many applicants applying for that one or two roles. How do you differentiate yourself? How do you stand out?
Adam, do you want to take this one first, and I'll...
Yeah, I mean, so candidates from non-Canadian law schools have both the advantage and disadvantage of standing out. You immediately come to our attention because it's a non-Canadian law school, and that's typically we're used to seeing candidates from Canadian law schools. So in that respect, it's an advantage to be a candidate with an unconventional background. An interesting law school with interesting non-Canadian experience. On the other hand, it can be a bit of a disadvantage insofar as some of the lawyers and professionals who are responsible for evaluating your application may be totally ignorant about your background and about your law school. So and maybe that doesn't directly answer your question, but you will stand out by virtue of your non-Canadian legal and/or professional background, and then it's up to you to make the most of that. And sometimes what's required is a personal touch. So if you're in Calgary, it may take a coffee meeting or a lunch with one of the student recruitment committee members, or it may take coffee with one of our students or associates, or it may take a Zoom meeting, a bit like this, coffee over Zoom or Google Chat or some other medium for video conferencing. And once you make that personal connection, you really start to stand out.
Okay.
So
Thanks, Adam.
I'll just add in a little bit here. When it comes down to the interview process, once you get the interview, our firm is big on fit and being able to. We have a really good thing going on with our firm in terms of the culture and very talented associates here. And what it really comes down to is, are we going to get along with this associate? Are we going to get along with these students? And are we able to train them? Are they able to ask the right questions? Can we mold them into the lawyers that we would like to produce? So I think it comes down to a lot of being able to fit in and personality. And are you part of extracurricular activities? Are you part of things around the community? And have you made those, going back to Adam, have you made those connections with people at the firm? That goes a long way, saying, hey, I know X, Y, and Z. I'm on the softball team with them, or I'm, maybe we were colleagues at law school, or whatever that looks like. But it does come down to, will you be part of the fabric of our firm?
Yeah, so I'd like to add to that. That's a really perceptive comment. He used a term, he used the word fit. And as you go through the recruitment process, you will hear that word a lot. But it's really important that you're a good fit with your firm or your potential firm. And it's difficult to, it's fits intangible, somewhat intangible. It's difficult to explain, but I'll give you an example. I've worked at some much larger law firms, and I was surrounded by really incredible, accomplished lawyers and all around decent human beings, but the fit wasn't right.
Right. Yeah. And I totally get what you're saying, Adam. It makes complete sense.
Yeah.
And so my future at the firm was somewhat limited, and it all came down to fit, and it took me a few years. But yeah, that intangible fit's really important.
And I think it goes both ways, right? Once you're interviewing with a firm, you may not get a good vibe from the interview panel, or you may not get a good vibe from knowing what the firm is about, or you may think that the firm is doesn't value what you value, and that's okay, right? Although everybody wants a job, everybody needs a job, you don't want to work for a place that you don't believe in. And yeah, I think that's really important, because this is you want to make this a long-term thing and go into this as knowing that you want to spend 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 15 years at this firm, whatever you think is a decent time, and you don't want to be working in a place that you don't love going to every morning, right? And you get a pretty good sense of that from the first interview, I would think, anyways.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to what you guys were saying before about, have you spoken to anybody at the firm?
Right.
You can get a feel for a firm from its website. You can get a feel from articles that they produce and that they publish. But really, you're only going to get a true sense of the culture and the fit by talking and meeting with people. And I know you physically can't necessarily meet with people just yet, but you can get to know people by talking to them and seeing if you have any of those commonalities that just make you gel. And you're all very astute individuals. I'm sure you can tell if you like a person or not. So that definitely helps. And then I think, as you said, that will then come across into the next phase of the application. Because we're rapidly going through time here, let's scoot on. A lot of what we've talked about in terms of summer process is very similar to articling. Obviously different timing involved, slightly different application that you're going to fill in. It's probably a little bit more robust. There's a great question here that I'm going to ask Ahmed to say in 1 second. And coming from the UK myself, and Adam, you're probably aware of this too, there's a difference between being recruited for a training contract in the UK and being recruited for an articling process here in Canada. And so many of you may be aware of the training contract process. So Ahmed, do you want to ask your question? Because I think that's really relevant. See if I can help unmute you.
Oh, hi, sorry, I thought I unmuted for a second.
No, you're good.
I'll just read my question directly. So you already said how there's a difference between UK training contracts and articling applications. For UK training applications, each firm kind of usually have their own specific questions. This helps law firms to assess candidates beyond resumes and cover letters. In Canada, almost all the applications that I've come across include only the two, kind of just a resume and a cover letter. My question is, what is the common mechanism, strategy, or criteria that Canadian firms deploy to differentiate between the so many similar resumes? And how do they then determine who of the candidates are worthy of an interview?
It's a good question, but I think that's $1 million question that every applicant, whether you're a lawyer or you're a non-lawyer, right? So I'm not a lawyer by trade, and trying to get a job in any industry, I think that's $1 million question, is how do you differentiate yourself from any other candidate? You know, I think it goes back to my answer that I gave you during the interview, while you're interviewing. You know, we like to see some sort of, and I think, Adam, you may be in the same boat here. You know, we like to see some sort of diversity on the resume. Grades will only get you so far, and yes, obviously, you know, we do take grades into consideration. But we'd like to see, you know, what sort of person are you? You know, do you like to ski? Do you like to, are you part of any other community involvement initiatives? Are you part of, you know, any extracurricular things that you know, would set you apart? So again, it's a really difficult question to answer, because I think every applicant would ask that question.
Yeah, I think the cover letter and the resume are two really important components of your application package. I think they have to be clearly written. I think they have to be concise. I think, you know, unfortunately, each year we receive applications that contain spelling and grammatical errors.
Yeah.
And typically that will, but not always, that will disqualify a candidate from consideration. My advice to all of the participants on the call would be to get a friend or a family member or a business associate, someone else, to take a quick look at your cover letter and your resume before you submit it to a law firm. I've been practicing for 15 years now, and I will rarely send written work to a client unless it's being unless my legal assistant or a student or an associate or a partner has reviewed that written work. Because if you stare at something long enough, invariably you will miss something. You will make a careless spelling or grammatical error. That's just the way it is. Some applicants submit reference letters with their application packages. For most law firms in Canada, that's optional. Some candidates submit writing samples, but to be honest, your cover letter will give law firms a really good sense of how clearly and how carefully you write. I think the best cover letter I've reviewed in the past 3 or 4 years was written by a law student who was a elementary school teacher before she attended law school. And I attribute that to the fact that she was really careful and deliberate and thoughtful about how she communicated. And she communicated simply and concisely in her cover letter. And she didn't get bogged down in trying to impress us with long and complicated words or phrases and sentences. It was just, she very clearly communicated who she was, and she clearly differentiated. herself from other candidates through her interests, you know, her background, what she thought made her unique.
Okay. That's kind of, hopefully, Crystal, that's answered some of your question, which was specifically about cover letters. I would just add to what Adam says. If the application says only submit a cover letter and resume, only submit a cover letter and resume. However, if they say, please include a writing sample, include a writing sample, because you need to be able to follow the instructions. That's part of the application process they're looking for, is can you follow the instructions? They probably will ask for references later, so have them on standby. It doesn't hurt to have them sitting there, but that would be my one top tip, and I'm seeing a few heads nodding in agreement, so hopefully I'm not way off base with that one.
Yeah, Siobhan, just to add to that, just a couple of war stories. So attention to detail is really important. So we ask all applicants to address their application packages to our Chief Operating Officer. And one candidate in May spelled our Chief Operating Officer's name incorrectly. So that, I mean, it was difficult to overlook that mistake. Another candidate included references in his application package to a different law firm. You know, a similar law firm in size and practice area, but a different law firm nonetheless. And those kinds of mistakes often doom an otherwise impressive application package.
Yeah, I've received applications that have Miller Thomson written incorrectly. With Thomson doesn't have a P, but it sometimes have a P in it. So, so make sure that you've proofread your resume multiple times.
It sounds obvious, but I'm amazed by how often we see those kinds of mistakes.
Yeah. So one of the questions that's being asked is by Mrinal. Mrinal, if you want to unmute yourself so you can ask in a second. And this is in terms of timing. Like, when should ITLs be applying for positions? So Mrinal, do you want to ask your question?
Yeah. So I wanted to know that as an ITL who has experience for over 7 years in corporate law, we would get probably a complete exemption from the articling process completely, and be directly called to the bar after we pass our bar exams. So I just wanted to know that do you think like going for that exemption is disadvantageous in some way? And because we already have like good M&A experience probably, or corporate law experience, or different sorts of experience. So just because we don't have Canadian experience, would it be disadvantageous as a applicant?
And I would probably add to that, just to explain, they'd possibly be applying for an associate position rather than an articling position at that point.
Yeah.
So I can't speak for Miller Thomson because I haven't had that experience on my end, but from when I was working as a recruiter, again, it depends. So I know that's a very lawyer-like answer, but it depends on the experience. It depends on and again, Adam, you can probably jump in here, but I think it depends on the type of position that you're looking for, and the work that you've already been doing from before. So I don't have a definitive answer on that. I think it's a little bit, it's a different scenario that I've never come across.
So we had an applicant from a law school in a country that was completely new to us, and we found the best way to approach that candidate, and it may have been very frustrating for the candidate, but we approached it by taking baby steps. So we offered the candidate a 2 or 3 month clerkship, for lack of a better word. It was kind of like a summer student position. And then we eventually offered that applicant articles, even though that the candidate had over 10 years of professional experience. The problem we found is that the candidate's background was completely new to us, and we weren't sure how to evaluate that candidate. So again, it must have been very frustrating for the candidate, but the candidate was very gracious, very patient with us. And we were able to be a bit more flexible by virtue of the fact that we're a smaller firm. And, but I mean, it's on a case, it really is on a case by case basis. And I implore you to be patient with Canadian firms who may never have heard of the law firm and be unfamiliar with your background.
And you know, and it's a risk on the firm, and it's also a risk for you as well, because you may again not, you know, be so. You may not know what you're getting yourself into, and the firm also doesn't know what it's getting itself into, because you have this previous knowledge of this great experience that you've had in a different country, but you come into a law firm saying, you know what, I have no idea what I'm doing, and everything is so different. Culturally, it's different. The nuances are different. The language is different. The keywords that the firm uses. And yeah, it kind of goes both ways, right? So again, if you're working at, you know, Stikeman Elliott in, I don't know if Stikeman Elliott's in an international country, but I think they may be in Hong Kong. Maybe I know there's some international firms that are both in Canada and international. But
let's just go with Denton's. Let's just use Denton's as an example.
Let's go with Denton's. You know, that may be different because Denton's has a similar platform as Canada platform as well, right? So that's a recognized law firm too. So
yeah, I would agree. I mean, I had UK experience when I moved here, and the thing is that what you've got to remember is when you come as an articling student, yes, you record your time. Yes, your time is billable, but it's at a much lower rate. When you're coming in as a lateral hire, which is what they refer to it as an associate, you're coming in with an expectation from the firm that you are going to produce money for the firm.
mm-hmm.
Now, whenever you go to a new job, any kind of new job, there's a learning curve. But coming in with no or very, very little local experience is going to make that learning curve probably longer. So it's how quickly can you move up that curve and be seen to be a fee earning producer, because there's going to be targets of some description on you. So I think, as both Adam and Akash have both said, you have to balance the desire to speed through the process with the needs of the firm and your long-term career objectives. So maybe rather than getting a full exemption, maybe you apply for a partial exemption, and then you're only having to do a shortened version of your articles, which may be advantageous for some firms, especially if they have the flexibility of a firm like Adam. But if you're going into a larger firm, such as Miller Thomson's, they have a calendar, and they hire within that calendar. And to hire outside of that calendar requires them to change what they're doing. And you've got to be an incredible candidate for them to change that. So there's an awful lot of other things that come with it. So it's not to say no, I don't think anyone's suggesting no, but there's a lot more at play. So it's not an easy answer, and your experience has got to be relevant to the firm. Just because you've done corporate M&A work or securities work, I did securities work in the UK, it's quite different to Canadian securities work. So there was a learning curve on that for me as well. So, you know, keep that in your mind for everybody on that one. So hopefully, Mrinal, that helps.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Thank you.
perfect. Eric, you had a question about the qualifying certificate and timing of applications. Eric is our CPLED representative as well, so this is helping him with his CPLED knowledge.
Nice.
Yes, I'm just having to scroll back and find where my question was. It looks like it was a while ago. Where the heck was it? So basically, I think it was along the lines of the fact that I've been talking with a lot of big firm recruiters in Alberta in the last couple of weeks as I kind of get into my new role. And they have all been telling me that if you're an NCA and you don't have your CQ yet, then it's not worth applying because they're not going to even look at you. And so for people who are NCAs, when they get their CQ, what are some of the cycles? What are the best ways for them to get in for positions once they've got that?
The CQ is the certificate that the Federation of Law Societies grant once you've completed all of the NCA requirements. So they've deemed you equivalent to a Canadian JD.
That's right.
What CQ is.
I don't know if there's a hard and fast rule. I do know that large national firms are inundated with applications, including applications from candidates who are in the process of obtaining that qualification certificate. So I can understand why they would be inclined to wait. In our experience, we will review applications from candidates who have not completed that process. But I can't think of an example where we've offered an articling position to a candidate before they've received that qualification certificate, and I'm not even sure we're permitted to. So while we will review applications from candidates who are in the process of obtaining that qualification certificate, we will usually defer any position, articling position, until, or defer a decision until the qualification certificate has been obtained.
So potentially then those would be the kinds of people that might want to apply for a legal assistant role or a paralegal role, and perhaps combine getting Canadian experience with the preparing for their exams.
Now, if they're applying for a legal assistant role, we'd be happy to consider them for that role. And if they wish to apply for an articling position or a summer student position, in the meantime, we'll consider that. Again, we have the luxury of being a bit more flexible because we're smaller and we receive fewer applications. It's on a case-by-case basis.
Cool, thanks, Adam.
And then that's exactly the answer I was going to give too. So.
And thank you, Akash.
There you go. A similar process then for everybody. That's probably why then people, if you're applying early for an articling position, you maybe are not getting through to the next round because you're in a sort of a holding pattern until you have the QC. However, I would suggest though, if you've finished your exams and you're just waiting to receive the paperwork, then you probably should be applying because it's just a matter of administrative reasons on that one. We're gonna wrap this up pretty soon. So if you do have any burning questions, get them in ASAP. But Jawad had a question going back to referees and references, if you guys wouldn't mind.
Hi, thank you for being here and for answering all these questions for us. It's been extremely helpful. Just one quick question from me. Those of us who are newcomers into Canada and have experience outside of Canada, we are required at times to give references. Are references accepted from people outside of Canada? That's my question.
So for if you, I can speak from the lateral recruitment, a lateral associate, we will, depending on who the reference is. If it's a previous law firm, let's just say, or yeah, I would say it would more apply to my role if you are an associate coming in for the summer or articling process. It's a little bit of a different process in terms of your references. So Adam, maybe you can speak to that if you guys do check this for students.
So we often receive reference letters.
Yeah.
We will review those reference letters. It's not always wise to submit reference letters unless you're highly confident that the person providing the reference letter is going to give you a glowing review. It may sound obvious, but it's worth stating in any event. I think we find reference letters from law firms much more informative and helpful than reference letters from professors at law school or your undergraduate studies.
Right.
And the more specific the reference letter, the better. Generic reference letters are not very helpful at all.
Right. Just to piggyback off that, if the reference, like for me, I have actually practiced in my own firm, and I was the managing partner of my own firm. I have my own partners to give references, but my references would probably be from judges and from other senior lawyers who I've worked with. Do those reference letters have to be addressed directly to the firm, or can they be without any addressees?
They're typically not addressed to the firm because that would require you to obtain, if you're applying for a dozen different firms, that would require you to obtain a dozen different reference letters. And that's a lot to ask of someone, a judge or a lawyer or one of your former clients that's providing a reference letter.
All right, we are going to do our very last question because everyone has to move on. I know my stomach is rumbling here in the background. And Akash has to go to another meeting. But if anyone does want to do a part 2 and you do have more questions, Akash has very kindly said he'll come back. I haven't asked Adam yet. But we'll do another session later on. Just drop us an email. I've put the email address in the chat box. But the final question, I am going to read this one out so we get to speed through this one very quickly. This was Deo's question. Does obtaining an LLM from a Canadian university provide an advantage for an internationally trained lawyer over somebody who hasn't done an LLM but just does the NCA requirements? And I know this is going to be subjective, but what are your gut feelings, gentlemen?
So it's a good question, and I've been asked this question before in my recruiter days. I always said, because there were firms that I was working with that did like to see that. It gives you a little bit more. The reason why I think some of the firms do appreciate it, it gets you familiarized with the legal system. It gets you familiarized with the legal world as it is in Canada, and I think it familiarizes yourself with legal concepts. As well as you get to, I guess the drawback of it is you're focusing your LLM in one specific area, and you may not love that area once you're done, your articles or whatnot. So I think it's a good thing. I don't know if it gives you an advantage, but I'm a big believer in further studies, and I do believe that having that LLM is some clout in your resume. So I'm not 100% sure if it gives you a leg up against other candidates, but I do think it's a nice to have. But that's just a personal opinion. I could be completely wrong, Adam, and you may think it's not.
No, I absolutely agree. It's a nice to have.
Yeah.
It's not mandatory. It won't give you a significant advantage, but it may get your foot in the door if, for example, you have a master's degree of law in tax or securities law, for example, then because we specialize in those areas, we're more likely to pay attention to your application. On the other hand, if you have a master's degree in intellectual property or criminal law or human rights law or international arbitration, all of which are areas we do not practice, it's unlikely to be of any benefit.
There we go. So hopefully that makes sense. I would wholeheartedly agree. However, if you are coming from a civil law background, strongly consider the LLM program to meet your requirements. That is a completely different scenario. We're talking about people coming from a common law jurisdiction here. On that one, gentlemen, thank you so much for coming, giving us your time, giving us your wisdom, your tips. The questions are still flying in, so we'll definitely have enough for a second session with you all. We'll discuss that offline with you. Have a lovely evening. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. Thank you for giving us your questions. We love them all. Next week, we do have a break. We don't have a session because it's Canada Day on the Wednesday, and I need to catch up with my life on the Thursday because Adam is going to be emailing me with lots of work to do now. But we will be back after the long week. I'm going to call it a long week. I mean, I've never had a Canada Day fall on a Wednesday since I've lived here, and I've been here 11 years. This is blowing my mind. It's in the middle of the week. By the way, you guys can always contact us on LinkedIn. I'm sure you can contact Adam and Akash on LinkedIn. Be polite, say hello. We always like it. Introduce yourselves. It definitely makes the connection a lot easier going forward. And have a lovely evening, everybody. Enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Akash. Thanks, Adam.
Take care.